Welcome to the Paper Trail, where we follow the journey, my journey, through the world of a CEO of a mortgage note fund. I'm Chris Seveney, and after years of buying, managing, and selling notes with Seveney Investments, I'm here to share the real stories behind the deals. What went right, what went wrong, and what I wish I knew earlier. From non-performing loans to seller financing to private lending, this show is about more than strategies, about growing your business, learning to follow the paper trail, and doing the due diligence that separates the pros from the rest. Now, let's hit the trail running. Welcome to this episode of the Paper Trail podcast. Today, I was able to interview DJ Olojo with ASO Holdings, as well as author of The Foreclosure Fix. DJ is a real estate investor who also primarily invests in second position mortgage notes, and he will be speaking at the Paper Trail Conference September 18th to 20th in Chandler, Arizona, specifically on seconds, which is going to be an interesting topic because 10 years ago when I got started in notes, and we talk about this on this episode as you get to know DJ, seconds were around, but a lot of people were tailored towards first because there were some lower price firsts that you could buy. In today's economic environment, first position loans have gotten a lot more expensive. And for people who got limited amount of finances to get involved in this space, seconds are a great avenue. So DJ talks about that, talks about his path to growing his business, and also the fact that his business partner is his wife, which is also unique. And, just overall great episode of getting to know DJ before you get to meet him at the conference this September. So hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to this episode. DJ, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Chris, man. How you doing?
I'm good. You're all dapper with, the bow tie and the nice shirt. I actually, so I recorded multiple episodes today, but I wore a shirt my wife recently got me, and she was happy because I'm typical dude, creature of habit, wear like the same clothes every day and you're working from home or whatnot, especially not on video. And, basically she's finally like, oh, you finally cut the tag off that one. So, I get a little bonus points today.
Hey, man. Hey, you look a lot nicer than you usually look.
I know. Well, that's not hard to look nicer than I usually look. So, even shaved last night and stuff, and my hair's not all over the place. But I can never look as good as you, nor could I even grow facial hair like you have. But for those listening, DJ with the goatee. But
Hey, it's all good, man. Hey, some of us need to overcompensate with the way we look because we don't have as much brain power as you. So I'm just trying to get invited into the room. That's all.
Yeah, brain power. Talk to my wife about brain power. See what her opinion is compared to others. Well, enough about that. We are today talking to DJ, where we're talking about the Get Your Know Your Speakers for the Paper Trail Conference that's coming up. I'm excited to have DJ speak, which I've known DJ now for many years, and one of the few note investors who I've actually met in person several times as well. And you might laugh at that, but I'll tell you, it's kind of rare for people to actually meet me in person because I don't travel to tons of conferences, and I'm always out and about. But so as we get started, DJ, let's start with tell us a little more about your story. How'd you get involved in investing in the first place?
Yeah. So right after kind of like the foreclosure crash, I started investing in residential real estate locally here in Atlanta with a couple buddies. And, that blossomed and bloomed. And I went from just doing it as a hobby to quitting my full-time consulting job to doing it full-time. And I still am an active real estate investor locally, in addition to being a builder and a real estate agent. But I started investing in mortgage notes maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. And I had done some like small notes where you lend a friend a small amount of money secured by a real estate asset, but I hadn't done anything, larger. And I didn't know that you can actually buy institutional notes and go down that road. And so about maybe 5, 6 years ago, I kind of got involved in this world called note investing, and it's been a game changer. It's changed the way I look at real estate, both, brick and mortar real estate and paper, and it's really helped me increase my business acumen as it pertains to the financial world.
Yep. And you're also a podcast host as well,
Oh
correct?
yeah, I got a podcast, got a book, some other stuff like that, but you know,
So, what's interesting in your story is similar to mine, which you come from a real estate background or you've been in real estate, and all of a sudden you find out like, wait, you can invest in institutional and buy institutional paper? Like, I was pissed. Like, how did I not know you could do this type thing? And, a lot of people still don't know. I've got we were just talking before, like I was a fraternity with, 60 something guys in a house that, constantly churning. So when I was there for 4 years, there was, hundreds of people, and 99% of them have no clue what I do even exists. And, probably the same with a lot of your friends and family too.
man, 100%. And it's one of those things where it's a game changer because
Mhm.
I personally don't like the volatility of the stock market. I have a very small amount of my net worth in the stock market. And what I like about real estate is that at least I can see it, I can feel it, I can touch it.
Yeah.
And what I like about mortgage notes is that it's
Mhm.
backed by something I can see, I can feel, I can touch. And for me, that was just a game changer in the way I viewed my investment journey, in particular, my retirement investment journey.
Yep. So you don't have majority of your portfolio in Bitcoin?
No, man, I'm sorry. My wallet is empty on that
So
side.
I was talking to someone earlier today. I'm like, I still just don't understand it, so I won't invest in it. And because I saw it was like over 100,000, I'm like, man, I know some people made a lot of money on it, and I feel like I'm left out. But I still don't get it. So,
Well, I definitely have FOMO on the Bitcoin. I'm not gonna lie. I know some people
oh, I
who,
do
who
too.
invested, they say the next one's gonna be XRP. I don't know. So,
Yeah,
or I think that's what it's
yeah.
called. But
Mhm.
I got FOMO on it, but at the same time, I have learned from notes and other real estate transactions is that,
Mhm.
invest in what you understand. Because every time I put
Yeah.
my money in what I don't understand, I typically lose it. So
Mhm.
I rather keep what's in my safe, as they like to say.
Exactly. Well, outside of the fact that you can invest in institutional and buy institutional notes, what's something about your journey that most people don't know but probably should?
On the real estate side or the note side?
Either one, and it could be a failure, like, maybe about your pivot of why you pivoted to notes, or, something about even your non-financial background and, notes, pretty much just anything about the journey that you find unique for your situation.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that is maybe different about my journey is that I invest with my wife. And that is unique because investing with a spouse can be just a challenging process. It could lead you to divorce. So let me just put that out there, right?
Mhm.
But no, on a more serious note, me and my wife are business partners on the note side, but then also more so on the residential real estate side. And so we have rental property, and she handles all of the management of those properties, and I handle the acquisition and the maintenance. And so one of the things that's very interesting about working with your significant other is that you both should have a shared vision, and you both are trying to get to the same destination, hopefully. But me and my wife are complete polar opposites when it comes to our investment strategies. My wife is very much, give me a small, fixed, steady return, no risk, no nothing crazy. And I'm very much like, hey, boom or bust, like, let's go for the gusto and stuff like that. And so oftentimes we are at very different ends of the spectrum when we talk about investments. And so it's been eye-opening and humbling experience, for both of us, to work together and to invest together. And I don't know if I would call us successful, but I would say we've kind of figured out the way to navigate those waters. So if you come to the conference and you want some advice or tips on working with your significant other, definitely pull me to the side. And I'll love to talk with you about what that looks like day to day.
Is your wife going to come?
She was supposed to be coming, but she had to cancel because unfortunately, our kids have obligations and she has to be
Uh,
there. So she is
okay.
taking one for the team. She was supposed to come though.
Okay.
So we're going to see if Granny can step in, but
Okay.
it's not
I
looking like she's going to be able
I
to.
would love to meet your wife. And it's funny you mentioned that because my wife and I, we built our primary residence and, we're always involved in like all our investments. But when I met my wife, when we got married, one of the first things she was like is like, "Are you okay if we still have separate bank accounts and just a joint one for everything?" And like, and it's like, absolutely, like, because that's one thing. Like, I've got mine, so if I go spend something and buy something, it's like, okay, I can go buy a toy. She wants to go get her hair and nails done, or go buy something, like, go ahead. It's like, as long as we got the money that we say we're putting into the account for our bills and then for our kids' school and everything else, like the slush fund, it's like, you got yours, I got mine, and saves a lot of arguments down the road. So, but now, everyone has a core investment philosophy, and it's interesting because you talked about with your wife how she's a conservative and you're kind of the I'll use my own term, cowboy, a little bit, which I know you're not a cowboy in regards to, basically, you're still very methodical. You're just not running around like doing, cowboyish things. You take on more risk, I think, or look at some deals that might have some higher risk, higher reward, but you also understand, I think, what you're doing and what the potential risks are. But, everyone has some core investment philosophy. If you could describe yours in one or two sentences, what is your philosophy?
I would say my core investment philosophy is to make 20% return. And that's it, and that sounds kind of
Mhm.
crazy and not realistic, but my goal with my investment portfolio is to make 20% return. And when I
Mhm.
look at that 20% return, it's not just, one number of like, hey, you made 20% return on this investment. Although I'll take that. The way I look at it is that 20% return is on the entire portfolio every year. And that could just be, hey, you increase in appreciation,
Mhm.
or you got depreciation because you didn't have to pay taxes on something, or it appreciated in some way, shape, or form, or you collected a coupon. And so I try to have an amalgamation where I'm averaging a 20% increase in my overall investment portfolio every year. Now, I'll be honest, it doesn't happen every year. And there
Mhm.
have been a couple years where I've done better than that. But the goal is to try to get 20% return
Mhm.
every year.
Now, it's interesting because, like you mentioned, some people will look at it and say that can't be done. And, the argument is, well, yeah, if you invest like, in X, Y, or Z, but this is where I had a discussion with somebody the other day about like forced appreciation in like single family on real estate. I'm like, you absolutely can. And a simple, easy way is if you know how to manage contractors, and you act as a GC, you just force appreciation by 25%. Because
Yep.
if it's going to cost you, a GC is going to charge 100,000, you're going to get it done if you act as the manager of that for 80,000. And you just force 20,000 appreciation. Yes, you spent time on there, but at the end of the day, there's strategies that with certain expertise is what you have in different aspects of real estate that can allow you to get to that number. So,
100%, man. And I
yep.
think that's the change that I think people have to have in their mindset.
Mhm.
Obviously, if you just want to collect a coupon, you're not going to see that type of return. You're going to be single digit, and if you're
Mhm.
safe, it's going to be mid to low single digit.
Mhm.
And if you want to put in some sweat equity, or if you want to spend some time, then you can really
Mhm.
juice your returns. And
Yep.
I'm at a stage and season in my life where I'm trying to run hard. So hopefully, in the next 20 years, I'm sitting on the beach and, just responding to emails and not necessarily working as hard as I'm working now. But
Mhm.
while I'm working hard, I'm trying to make that 20% churn.
Yep. Yeah. Go be sending me the emails, Chris, do this because I'll probably be working for you. So,
Oh, I may just say, hey, Chris, I want to make another investment in your fund around 1500,
there you go. So, um, we just talked about kind of your investment philosophy about the 20%. To get that philosophy, most people have some principle that they live by in business that, guides you whether you're dealing with borrowers, other investors, your vendors, business partners. if you had to describe one of your core principles, what do you think it would be?
Yeah, I think there are two core principles that I go by, right? One is, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Very straightforward principle
Mhm,
there. And then the next one is trust but verify. So
mhm,
those two principles are my
mhm,
core two principles as I look at note investing, as I look at
mhm,
business, is,
mhm,
I try to treat everybody the way I want to be treated.
mhm.
And, I trust you, but I will verify.
So it's interesting because I recorded a podcast earlier with a woman who does due diligence for private lending. And she was a former like federal investigator, and she got into the business because she had been burned in the deal. And when I asked her kind of one of her, you know, one of her things, it was she's like, I know a lot of people do don't trust but verify. I mean, trust but verify. She's like, I'm don't trust but verify, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, but that's pretty cold, and stuff. And she's like, well, I've been burned, so I'm just more of a, I'm not going to trust you, but I'll verify it and to earn your trust. So I'm like, interesting. So cool. Okay, so you were or you are going to be speaking at the Paper Trail Conference. We put this conference on and we were joking offline, like I've got nothing better to do. So Chris, just go start a conference. And, one of the things that I focused on with this conference was to bring together different groups of people within the note space, from private lending to seller finance to performing to non-performing notes, because I haven't seen a conference where all of them get together, because I know people like to learn about other aspects and also hear other stories from people, because that's where the relationships get built. For you, speaking and coming to a conference, why, what's the importance for you to be a part of the event?
Man, so I think that anytime you can get in the room with like-minded individuals, you are able to increase not only your IQ, but
Mhm.
also your net worth, right? And
Yeah.
so anytime I have gotten in rooms with people who are trying to do what I'm doing, or people who are
Mhm.
way ahead of me in my journey, it
Mhm.
always leads to more dollars in my bank account. And so for me, the reason I'm excited to go is because I think it's going to help me not just make 20%, it's going to help me make maybe 25 or 30%, in this next coming year. In addition to that, again, it's that rule of, if you're around other people who are going in the direction you're going to go, you
Mhm.
may not get there as fast, but they're going to pull you in that direction. And so just being in these conferences and being in these rooms and having these conversations, sometimes the light bulb goes off for you, and it really can be a game changer in your, not only financial journey, but also in your own personal journey. And the last thing is that, a lot of my friends are coming. I consider Chris to be a friend, and we don't get to hang out and chop it up all the time, but you got
Yeah.
to believe at these conferences we're going to, have a good time, share some stories, share some war stories and some battle
Yeah.
scars, and just connect with other people. And so
Yeah.
that's the other part I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, about like, growing your net worth. And I tell people a story, and I've said it 1,000 times. 4 years ago, I was, working still on a W-2. Then I did a conference that my speaking engagement was how to lose money in note investing. And somebody saw that and was like, wow, I want to get to know that person. And that person essentially stalked me for several months until Shante, Shante.
Yeah.
Shante calls me one day. He's like, will you freaking call this woman? She says she sent you like 3 LinkedIn messages, a LinkedIn voice message, and she, wants to connect with you, and she's like really sharp and stuff. And, fast forward to today, that person, was my number one employee. They're my business partner. And, I was managing a few million in funds to today, you know, I've got 8 employees, and we've got over $40 million raised in our fund because of, this meeting, a lot of it meeting with this person, Lauren, because I'm not a salesperson. I'm not investor relations or money. I know how to find and buy deal type person. And I needed that other person, my call it Batman, Robin, or whatever you want to call it, duo, to feed off of something that is different from you. And, I wouldn't be where I was today without, speaking at that conference, or, more networking and finding people to figure out how to grow a business. So, yeah. Without spoiling your session, what's one thing you hope attendees can learn or think differently about note investing after hearing you speak?
Chris, and you got to give the audience a salacious kind of title so that way they just sign up for your session. So, my session is going to focus on how to turn $100,000 into $1 million in 10 years. What you think about
I like that.
that?
I was waiting for if you would have said 6 months or a year, I would have basically called you out and said that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Now I got to edit.
Yeah.
Which I have seen people, see that and so forth. But interesting. I mean, you're going to talk, about seconds,
Absolutely.
and it's a space that it's kind of, I don't know why it's so controversial, but it feels like there's a lot of controversy in seconds in this space. And it's, people either like love it or hate it. And, to me, it's, again, it's another avenue to grow a business. So I'm just curious some feedback on that.
Yeah, man. So I am in the second space. I love seconds. And the way I look at seconds is just, how do you turn small dollars into big returns? And,
Yeah.
I was joking about the title, but if you do the math, if you can grow your $100,000 at 23% over 10 years, it'll be $1 million. And so at the end of the day, the reality is that you can do that. And I am currently doing that with my seconds portfolio. And so ultimately, I'm excited to tell the audience one, more about seconds, two, how they differ than those first mortgages and things like that. And then the opportunity that's out there with seconds. And the beauty of it for me is like, I don't have a class, I don't have a toolkit that I'm trying to sell you. I don't have anything. I'm just going to tell you my own experience and let you kind of figure out what works best for your own personal investment strategy. And excited to kind of be a part of this all-star group you're putting together. And the only thing I got for you is a book, and if you come to the session, you may get a free copy of it. So I don't got more cards than that, Chris.
So what's interesting about seconds too is over the last 24 months, there hasn't been a huge increase in there hasn't been a lot of inventory in the second space. And from that, I know people who were involved started to, shift away to other ventures, and same thing with non-performing first as well. But when you look at, and I'm the type of person who I think I'm pretty good at like seeing the future, predicting, or just part of me is just like common sense to some of this stuff. But as note investors, we get to see a lot of, I'll say, like the prequel to the movies, because we see things in regards to people's loans that isn't being reported, or like hey, real estate's a slow moving space. So what happens today or what we see might not actually impact things for 6 months or a year. But the number of people who got lines of credit at very low rates or adjustable rates during COVID is mind blowing and off the charts. And as the interest rates have risen, everything's gotten a lot more expensive, taxes and insurance, and people go back to racking up a lot of those credit cards that they paid off with these lines of credit. I think, and it's not going to be tomorrow, but within the next 24 months, you're going to start to see a consistent supply of seconds in the space. Would you agree with that?
I do agree 100%. And I like the second space because I think it positions you very well to think creatively about opportunities. So if
Yep.
nothing else, what benefit investing in seconds has done for me is that it's given me the mindset of how do I try to make a deal work that on face value may not look like a good deal. And
Yep.
so when I think about your specific scenario, you have it with homeowners, but then you also have with investors because you do a lot of stuff with DSCR stuff and investment loans. And there are a lot of investors out there who are in predicaments now where they may not have properties that have enough to kind of service that first mortgage, or
Mhm.
the loan to value may be looking a little bit sketchy as things change. And so it creates another opportunity, as I think about some of the other speakers you have, not to just go buy seconds that are non-performing, but maybe also to originate seconds as you think about some of the other panels and speakers that are going to be talking about. And so the seconds mindset is not just about, oh, how do I buy an NPL, a non-performing loan, and then make it perform, but it's also, are seconds a better position for me to be in? Can I charge a higher interest rate because I'm in second position behind the first on an investment property? And all these other things. Can I take a shorter loan term, whereas the first mortgage may have a 30-year am? I'm only doing a 5-year note with the balloon. So does that protect me in the long run? Because my investment time horizon on that is shorter. All these different thoughts that you can have when you're dealing with seconds that maybe when you're dealing with the traditional first, you wouldn't have to think about.
No, and it's interesting because, like you said, there's seconds, and then at the conference we've got like private lending and some of these other things. But I've known people who've done, and here's an interesting situation. It's like, okay, where does this fit the box?
Yeah.
Somebody's owned an investment property for a long time. They got a rate at 3% on it that they've owned it for 8 years. It's a $300,000 property. I'm sorry, they have a $300,000 first. The property's worth 800,000, and they need to put 100,000 in there because they want to jack up the rent.
Yeah.
And would you give them a second? That might be an investor loan or private lending, but there's situations where, hey, look, you might be able to get a 15%. Write that for a 24-month loan at 15% interest only, and you're still at 50% loan to value. Now, that in some instances might be safer than a first that somebody did seller financing on, which we're gonna have a lot of topics on that, or a first that's at 70% LTV. There's so many different options and strategies and things to say. You just can't pick one and say, like, I don't do a lot of seconds, but I can't say, oh, seconds are bad. There's situations where a second and some seconds are far better than firsts, so it's really creating that situation that I know you're excellent at doing. So
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head, and
mhm.
that's the big thing around the second mortgage is it's another product, another
Mhm.
arrow in your quiver, another tool in your tool belt for you to be
Yep.
able to use and
Mhm.
and grow your
Mhm.
wealth.
Yep. Now, you've worked with, all kinds of investors. Besides just using the typical answer everyone gives and say, just be like Chris. Now, what makes a great investor in your opinion?
I'm sorry, I'm
I knew
uh,
I knew I was going to throw you for this one. So
yeah.
for people who know, again, DJ and I go back, many years, and we always banter back and forth with each other. So it's I had to throw that one out at you.
Well, you need a little bit of you take a little bit of wit from Chris, a little bit of style from DJ, and the brains of multiple attorneys, and you mix it all together. I think the big thing that an investor has to have is I'm trying to figure out a word that won't get bleeped out. So, is some gumption and some ability to take a risk, because I know a lot of people, and Chris, you probably know a lot of people who you have seen at conferences, the few you go to, or you have, seen on different conference calls or in masterminds you may be in, who, have been studying and thinking about investing in a note for like the last, 10 years.
Yeah.
And you ask them how many notes have they bought, and they'll say, "Oh, I got one." And it's not because of lack of resources, right? So I'm not, saying, "Hey, if you don't have the money, you're sitting on the sidelines, educating yourself is a bad idea." But a lot of these people have the resources. They just are scared to make a commitment. They're scared to actually pull the trigger. And I think you have to be smart enough and wise enough and bold enough to be able to say, I'm going to allocate a certain amount of money to this type of investment and be able to be okay if you lose that money. And so I think that that's the big thing a good note investor has to have, is that ability to take the risk and live with the outcome.
Yep. And it's interesting because I know of an investor who started right around the same time I did. And this person attends, I would say, at least a conference every other month. And I believe they've bought one note in that time. And one time they called me up and I got mad at them because I'm like, will you stop going to conferences and go buy a damn asset? Like, stop, just go buy something. And the issue is, there, and this is one of the things that I think people see. And, it's a conference, you'll hear a lot of conversations about this too. People are looking for the perfect asset. And what I mean by that is, I want the cleanest performing loan that's been paying for 5 years, but I also want to have like 20% L to loan to value, and I want to get it at a 13% yield. And it's like, well, it doesn't work that way. You could buy it maybe at 9 or 10 and still get above average, returns from the market at like 8, but you're not going to get like someone's not going to sell it to you at 13 and 14. And in the same token, they're like, oh, I got this one under agreement and like I got it for a good discount, but then I do all the work and it's like, well, it's missing this or that. And I'd have to spend work or time to go get that document. And, they missed a payment last year and, whatnot and so forth. I'm like, yeah, but that's why you're probably buying it at that, it's like anything, there's a risk involved, and the more hair on the asset, the more discount there will be, meaning hair, meaning more issues potentially with it. And sometimes people are just always waiting for that perfect situation. And I always use a term, there's the window shoppers, who are people who just go to a conference and look at everyone who's actually doing stuff and basically like, hey, I'm on the other side, just, good to see you. And then there's the actual doers. So no, I agree, because the only way you get better is by doing. I use the golf analogy. You can read every single book in the world on how to hit a golf ball, but I can guarantee you that the most advancement you'll ever make on a golf course is by either being at the driving range or at the tee box. So
100%. And that's another reason I love seconds, right? I have bought I'm not in the hundreds yet, but I've bought many. I think I'm past 70 notes or whatever. Most have been seconds. And the reason I've been able to do that is not because I have a lot of money, right? So, I don't throw that number out there saying like, oh man, if you do the math, it's not as much money as Chris probably. So, you know what I mean? But the reason I can is because you can buy small balance notes that are second mortgages. And so
yeah.
I've bought notes for as low as $1,000, all the way up to, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But at the end of the day, that ability to have the reps has allowed me to be able to feel more comfortable when I go spend, 25 or 30 or 50 or $60,000 on a note, to feel more comfortable to say, okay, I'm going to get my money back. And I think that that's the big thing that I love about seconds, is that you can have more reps and have more opportunities to learn and make mistakes. And I'll be honest with you, I've made a ton of them and I continue to make them. I just bought a note the other day, and then the person who I bought it from sent me a letter that says, hey, just so you know, we just got this in the mail, and it was basically the tax office letting them know that the taxes were sold, and that, if I don't write a big check, we're not getting it back. You know what I mean? So we still make the mistakes, but it's one of those things where it's you're always learning, but without these reps, you want to be in that position where you can.
Yeah, and somebody asked me the other day, which was a great question, if you started out today, what would you do differently? And I told them I would struggle a lot more today than I did 7 years ago or 10 years ago or 8, or I don't even know now. But the reason I say that is because back in like 2016, when I started, you could buy contract for deeds and these for other firsts for 5, 10, 15, 20,000, which today you can't. So to get started, and I was doing that, which again, it was the bulk factor of buy some loans, work them out, and just learn through the experience of buying, loan after loan after loan, and they're affordable, so you could recycle them. Today, you can't do that with first, but you can still do that with seconds, which is unique. So it's a different opportunity that previously people who were considering one thing, 10 years ago might want, if, with lesser money, get started in a different strategy. But so what's one mistake that you see newer investors make that you try to help them avoid?
Yeah, I think one of the big mistakes I see newer investors make is trying to follow too many different people in the industry. I think that, I've seen people who are part of like 3 different masterminds, and, take it with a grain of salt. I'm a part of a couple masterminds myself. So like, I'm not knocking masterminds. I think they're great. But again, it goes back to that. You got to find somebody who you want to learn from, and then learn from them and buy assets. The biggest thing you can do is buy assets. So if you can go buy assets, it changes your trajectory in the business. Because if I spend 2 or 3 years learning, yeah, it's important to sharpen your sword, or sharpen your axe before you cut down the tree. I agree 100%. But this is notes. You don't have to sharpen your axe for 4 or 5 years, right? You can sharpen your axe for 6 months and continue to sharpen it, as you're buying additional notes. And so learning from too many people, and being a part of too many masterminds versus going and go buy a note or create a note or, focus in and do something. That's the biggest pitfall I see people fall into.
Yeah. The other thing I see is people not only in 3 different groups, but they're on 3 different things. One's in a group doing this, one's in a group doing that, and have too much where it's like, okay, focus on one thing. Because when you focus on multiple things, you end up doing nothing. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier today, similar, like they're trying to find more sellers, more sellers, more sellers. And I told them, like, look, I already gave you a name of 5 sellers, and you told me how much money you have. Focus on them. Like, you don't need 20 sellers if you got $100,000 invest. Focus on that one. Buy, if you trust me, if you buy a deal or several deals with a seller and go through a due diligence, close and do it in an efficient manner, over time, that person's going to remember you because it's small space. And then, then you roll that one up, do another one. You call them up, say, hey, great, I got that deal. It's done. You got something else for me. All of a sudden, you get like 2, 3, 4 deals from one person. It's snowballs. To this date, again, I have lost track how many notes I bought. But the majority of the loans we buy, and it's shifted over the years. There used to be one seller we bought a lot from. They're no longer around and stuff, but and it shifts consistently. But at any given point in time, it's typically 3 people. And I could name 25 sellers right off the top of my tongue who sell loans, but primarily I typically buy from like 3. Now, it doesn't mean I don't buy from the others. It's one-offs in here, but it's primarily from the same people who I've built relationships over the last decade with.
Yeah, no, and when I think about my portfolio, majority comes from one seller.
Yeah.
And then, I got about 4 others that I bought
Mm.
from, you know what I mean? And
Yep.
so it's one of those
Mhm.
situations where, again,
Mhm.
if you get in, you get in a good space. And another thing about that, as you talk about sellers, is there's a rapport that's built, right? So if
Mhm.
for some reason a
Mhm.
deal doesn't work out, in
Mhm.
your favor, they'll remember you on the other one. Like, they
Oh,
won't
yeah.
they won't fade you,
Mhm.
or they'll help you out on another
Mhm.
one. And that's it's the relationship piece. Like I know that if I buy a note from Chris and it goes sideways for, something
Mhm.
that's out of his control, well, I know in the future he'll look out for me, right? And that's just the relationships you build, and that's just the way it works in any business, but specifically in this small
Mhm.
space.
Yep. 100% agree. Okay, as we wrap up this episode, we're going to do a little bit of lightning round, uh, and so forth, and ask you a few questions as we wrap up. What's one word you would use to describe the current market?
Buyer beware.
Ooh, I like that. It's actually 2 words, but I'll let you get away with it. You
Thank
can
you very
you
much.
can
I
hyphen
appreciate
it. So
it.
no, it's and I mentioned this in elsewhere too. I've been getting trolled a little bit on social media because I kind of made that comment where somebody made a comment, "Oh, properties are still selling well over asking price in certain markets," and I'm like, okay, but 49 out of 50 markets are declining, and certain markets you're seeing huge drops, and the person's like calling me out and stuff, and like show it to me. And I actually took um, because there's all public notice, 2 properties that are nearing foreclosure and a brand new neighborhood of 14 homes
Wow.
that the house, 2 of them are in foreclosure, and they're in foreclosure for call around $1 million to $1.1 million, where all the other homes are selling for 1.5. Okay. And I was using an example is these went to foreclosure. Actually, they just finished. One of them finished foreclosure. The other one's like foreclosure in like 2 weeks. And I said, this one just sold at foreclosure auction for like 1,050,000. The other one's coming up. All the other houses are selling for 1.4, 1.5. But only like 4 of the 14, like they're still being built, have sold. And I use the example of what is going to happen when somebody goes to buy a house for 1.4 million and the last 2 sales in that neighborhood are REOs for $1 million.
Yep.
I'm like, the appraisal's going to come in low. It's going to drop the prices and everything's going to. You go to Southwest Florida, Cape Coral, Port Charlotte, that area, people are building homes. Builders are walking away from homes because they thought they'd be worth $500,000 when they're done constructing them. They're in the worth 300 grand, 350 now,
Yep.
375. I mean, those are it's 20% decline. That's a big number. So
Yep.
cool.
Same
Yep.
thing may happen in that subdivision you're talking about because they're not done building the houses. They're gonna be like, it's not worth it. Let's take
Yeah.
our loss now.
Yep. So, what's one thing you've changed your mind about in the last year?
Mm, avocado toast.
Ooh, are you a fan?
I am now.
Okay.
Your bread has to be the right texture, but I had it before and the
Lightly
bread
brown
wasn't right.
or
Huh?
lightly brown? Like,
Yeah,
okay.
lightly brown or maybe even a little bit more toasted. But I had it a
Okay.
couple times and the bread was soggy. It was like, I'm not a fan. But
Okay.
I've had it recently and I was like, okay, with the right toast on the bread, a
Okay.
nice, not good lunch or breakfast.
So it's interesting because my wife and daughter are big avocado toast, like if we go out for breakfast and stuff. And I've never been, but I try, like, there's my daughter who's, small and can never, like, breakfast places give you like the big thing. And she's like, yeah, I ain't eating all that. So one time I'm like, let me try some of it. And I was tasting it. I'm like, I'm not usually a big avocado person. I'm like, man, it's actually pretty good. So yeah, cool. Uh, and then last question, again, besides me, because I just don't want you to jump to a conclusion. Who's a person you'd like to thank for your success?
I'll probably say my wife. She will never listen to this podcast, so
I was
she
just
won't
gonna
know.
say you're
She,
probably gonna name your wife just to be in the good graces, but you
but
you did business with her, so that's pretty
Look,
impressive.
she'll never listen. But I think like anything else, the beauty of marriage in general is that it keeps you humble, and especially when you're somebody like me who thinks you have it all figured out and you're willing
Mhm.
to go in
Mhm.
guns a blazing.
Mhm.
She is definitely the person who's like, no, you're wrong, and she'll remind you of how many times you've been wrong, and she keeps a very good record of it. And so I think that that's helpful for somebody who has a little bit of an ego,
Yeah.
and it's also helpful to kind of have her perspective, because opposites do attract in some way, shape, or form. But she's helped me make a lot more wise decisions where I would go in guns a blazing, and so she's definitely a big contributor to my success.
Yeah, and it's interesting for anybody who has, a spouse or a partner out there, and you're kind of, an entrepreneur in the business. Don't underestimate how powerful that partner can be. And a lot of times you're like, I don't want to put that upon them and stuff. And I can't tell you how many times I've just like ran situations by my wife who was 1,000 times smarter than me, anyways. But just, having that conversation with her, or just sometimes if you have like, even just to calm you down a little bit, or, just, sometimes because I'm the type of person sometimes who I actually have a 10-second delay on my send because sometimes I get a little hot, or fired up a little bit. But, just hearing another opinion, but also if it's not your business partner, just somebody who's not as involved. Because sometimes a situation you get so involved in it, you can't see the forest from the trees.
Yep.
And, having that, with you, the tag team with you and your wife, that's actually an awesome partnership. And, congratulations for, keeping that and being successful in it.
No, thank you. And again, um, a lot of the success just comes from the fact that
Mhm.
uh, she's a lot smarter than me, but lets me take a lot of credit. So you know what I mean? It'll be her idea, but I'm like, yeah, when I told you that, she's like, yeah, I told you that 5 years ago, but yeah, it's your idea. You know what I mean? So, but no, like you, man, I think we both have, outkicked our coverage as it comes to our wives. So we're salesmen. That's what we do, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, well, DJ, thanks for coming on today. Always a pleasure, getting a, talk shop with you. If people want to learn more about you, reach out to you, what's the best way? And tell, what book, what's the name of the book and podcast that they can listen to? Gotta sell yourself a little bit now.
Yeah, so I am DJ Olojo on all socials. My email is DJ at asoholdings.com. My book is called The Foreclosure Fix: 12 Proven Steps to Beat the Bank, Escape Foreclosure, and Turn Your Property into a Profitable Asset. And if you want to reach out to me, you want to see me, you want to talk to me, you got to come to the Paper Trail Conference. Because if you're there, we'll have conversations over coffee, over lunch, over libations, and we'll just have a really good time. And I would love to see you in the place. I plan to be there both tie and all. So make sure you get your ticket. I know that there is some promo codes if you are one of the first folks to kind of sign up, and not first, but sign up before a certain date. So I'll let Chris tell you about how to do all that. But definitely, I would love to see you there and look forward to meeting you in person.
Yep. So you can just go to papertrailconference.com. It's September 18th to 20th in Chandler, Arizona. It is multiple days of investing discussions, workshop sessions, networking, and also last day. I know a lot of people like to try and bail early, so we are going to spend a day talking AI, and I've already got my person creating some crazy stuff that trying to blow some people's minds with just, where the business could also be headed. So thanks for listening to this episode. And as always, continue to follow that paper trail. Thank you all. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Paper Trail. I hope today's insights help you sharpen your note investing strategies. If you found value in this conversation, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow investors. I'm Chris Seveney, reminding you to keep doing the work, trust the process, and always follow the paper trail. Until next time.